Chapter 30. Tessa whirled around and reached for the doorknob, but Gideon put a steadying hand on her arm. I see you've added a retinal scan to your defenses, he said mildly, speaking to someone beyond her. It's lucky that I anticipated that possibility. It's Deck said in a surly tone, not Dekaterina. Tessa decided that if Gideon could talk so calmly about retinal scans, and if Deck could focus on her name above all else, then the three of them couldn't be in immediate danger of death. She let go of the doorknob, blinked a couple of times to clear her vision, and looked around. She expected to see a man standing there, or maybe a woman. It was a little hard to tell from just the voice. All she saw were blank white walls. She couldn't even see a speaker as the source of the voice. Who's talking? She hissed at Gideon. The master computer for the entire military, Gideon said. The one that controls everything else. Oh, I'm just the backup, the voice said in a humble tone. A repository for lots of useless information that's also stored elsewhere. Lie number one, Gideon said in a tight voice. Or is it just the first lie that I'm sure of? You know there was a time when people debated whether computers would even be capable of telling a lie? The voice asked. When that was the hot controversy in AI? That's artificial intelligence, Tessa. You're looking a bit confused. So it can see me too, Tessa thought, and figure out my expression? In Tessa's experience, computers were thin and flat and lay on her desk like something dead. They didn't think for themselves. They didn't know anything about you. Unless they can see the data from all the cameras on the streets, Tessa thought. Unless they have access to everything that was ever recorded about a person. Tessa was spooking herself. She looked over at Deck to see if the other girl had figured everything out yet. But Deck just had her head tilted thoughtfully to the side, as if she were waiting to see what would happen next. You're changing the subject, Gideon said, angrily, talking to the computer again. You always do that. Because you humans are so easily distracted, the voice said, sounding slightly bored. Shall I tell you how to get out of here scot-free? How to establish false identities and live out the rest of your lives in peace and comfort? That's not what we want, Gideon said. He glanced at Tessa. Or not the only thing we want. Tessa expected Deck to pipe up and say, Hey, I'll take that offer. I want out of here. But Deck was still quietly looking around. I'm not the genie in the bottle, the voice said. I don't grant wishes at humans' whims. Oh dear. Probably Tessa is the only one who gets that reference, right? The other two of you never got any exposure to fairy tales. There's so much that most of you humans eliminated from your culture. Fairy tales, philosophy, history, literature, religion. It wasn't illegal, Tessa said sharply. I wasn't breaking any laws reading all those old books. No, of course not, the voice said. But you did make yourself a bit of an outsider, knowing things that nobody else had ever heard of. He thinks I knew more than other people, Tessa marveled. Like, maybe I'm smart? Not the most stupid person around? Why didn't you ever share your knowledge, the voice continued, and now it had taken on an accusing tone. Why didn't you tell just one other person of the stories you liked, or the ones one of the facts you learned? Nobody would have cared, Tessa said. She was surprised that her voice cracked. Nobody ever did care. Gideon balled up his fist against his forehead. Stop it, he cried, yelling directly at the wall. You're playing those psychological games again. Leave her alone. Of course, the voice said. I would never dream of picking on some poor, defenseless child. She's not defenseless, Deck said. None of us are. Did Deck really believe that? Or was she as big a liar as the computer? Deck was still watching the wall. What could she possibly find so interesting in a blank, white wall? We want answers, Gideon insisted. Answers to what? The voice asked, as blandly as if it were offering them tea. How much of the videos are lies? Gideon asked. Why didn't the war zone look anything like I expected? Where were all the people? How could satellite footage be so wrong? Why wasn't even the border in the right place? And, my dear boy, the voice said, and now it was definitely patronizing. You know yourself that you haven't been functioning at your highest level of brain power. You know you've been a little psychologically impaired. Did you ever think about how it would have been incredibly easy for me to override the geographical coordinates you gave your stolen plane? You're just lucky I sent you somewhere safe and protected and out of the way. I knew exactly where I was, Gideon insisted. The rivers were right, the lakes, even the fuel tanks in Shargo were in the right place. How do you explain that? Do you have access to so much empty land that you can make an entire fake enemy territory to fool ignorant pilots? Well, yes, actually I do, the voice said calmly. I had my own GPS unit, Deck interrupted, independent of anything on the plane. What? Tessa thought. Deck had to be bluffing. If Deck had really had a GPS unit when they were in the war zone, wouldn't she have mentioned it? Wouldn't she have used its data to help navigate where they were flying blind, or at the very least, to show off that she was smarter than Gideon? Tessa didn't say anything, but the computer voice countered Deck almost carelessly. You're lying. I just checked all my data, and there was no contact with any unidentified GPS unit near that stolen airplane any time in the past 24 hours. Even if you had a GPS unit, you didn't use it. Not with any Eastham contact, Deck admitted. I set it to tap into Westham's satellite system, the enemy's system, and it confirmed everything about our location. But, but that would have been too dangerous, the voice sputtered, sounding panicked now. You wouldn't have dared to. I've been working with the black marketers for the past 4 years, Deck said. I stowed away on a plane flying into enemy territory in the war zone. You think I'd be afraid to use a GPS unit? Tessa was impressed that Deck could come up with such an elaborate bluff. But surely the computer would point out the holes in her story. How would Deck know how to contact the enemy's satellite? Wouldn't that have tipped off the enemy that they were in the war zone? Wouldn't the enemy have just attacked? If Tessa could figure all this out, surely the computer could too. But the computer voice didn't answer. Its sudden silence seemed hesitant, indecisive, and maybe a little fearful. Or is the computer just being secretive? Tessa wondered. Is there something it's afraid it might reveal if it calls Deck's bluff? Gideon stepped forward, taking control of the conversation. We know what we saw, Gideon said. You have to explain it to us. There was a sound like a throat being cleared. Well, if you must know, the voice began slowly. Now, Deck screamed. Deck flung herself at the blank wall directly in front of them and tore it down. Maybe she'd been carrying a knife. Maybe she was just using her bare hands. The destruction was so rapid, Tessa couldn't tell. Gideon immediately dived behind the wall. Got the depth shot, he yelled. Perfect!